Thank you very much, Alan. Thank you very much, colleagues from the National Bank and the Ministry of Finance, to give us the opportunity today to give the investment community a little update on what we have achieved exactly 2 years ago. On the 27th of May 2019, we started the Clearstream link with Ukraine. And we want to recap a bit what has happened over the last 2 years, where we come from, present you a bit where we're standing today, what have we achieved now 2 years later, and give you a little bit a prospect of what we hope to launch and improve in our service offering in Ukraine any further. So my name is Jan Willems. I am head of global markets at Clearstream. I've been more than 20 years in the organization, and in my role I am responsible for all the accesses that Clearstream provides to the various markets where we are active. So I am also joined here by my colleague Serge Christ, who is basically the mastermind of the products. And together, the last 2 years, we have been assisting the market in accessing Ukraine and further improving the products. At the end of the presentation, you will see my email address and the email address of Serge. For being Belgian and French, you are lucky. Both our first names and family names are rather easy. So I will ask Aladan at the end to make sure that the slides with our contact details are clearly visible if ever you want to ask us any questions after this session. So Ala, let's just go to the first slides and give you a very short introduction about Clearstream. Clearstream is an international central securities depository based in Luxembourg, and together with Euroclear Bank in Brussels 50 years ago, we started as the unique safekeeping and settlement place for Eurobonds. So in that sense, every euro bond that circles in the capital markets is eventually settled and safe kept at either Clearstream or Euroclear. So in that sense, we know the Ministry of Finance already since a couple of years as an issuer of the US dollar denominated euro bonds. But we're not talking today here about the US dollar euro bonds. We're talking about the soft currency bonds. But anyway, so based in Luxembourg, nearly 15 trillion of assets under custody today. So we are clearly there in the top 5 of the global custodian community. And as I said, we started off with Eurobonds, and over the years we have been connecting our network through other markets in Europe, the US, matured markets in Asia, to then for the last 10 years expanding our coverage also to a series of emerging and frontier markets. So on the world map that we show you there, you see a bit our market coverage as it is today. So a near full coverage in Europe, where in red, the last market that we connected to was indeed Ukraine in 2019, and then some 21, 22 markets worldwide. I'll take the opportunity as well, although we'll talk only about Ukraine here today, that within 2 weeks we'll add another emerging markets to our market coverage, being Saudi Arabia, where we'll be able and settle on behalf of an investor community, Saudi local currency bonds. So that's in a nutshell what we do. Global presence, 2,500 clients worldwide. Nearly all major global investment banks and global custodians do have access to Clearstream. And then by default, every account holder in Clearstream has automatically access to all the markets that we show you there on our world map. Next slide, please, Ala. So we have a very matured, well-functioning, stable product for, the main global markets, thanks to the AA-rated rating that credit rating that Clearstream have. The markets likes to put their assets with us. We are a neutral organization. We don't have any investment banking branch that would collide with a global custodian branch. We are not an asset manager, so the only job we do is settlement and custody of securities. And the format that we had for the Eurobonds and the matured markets over the last 10 years has then become the template for the frontier and the emerging markets that right now we are targeting in our expansion strategy. And when we talked with investors, we often heard when it came to soft currency emerging market bonds, we always heard the same type of argument. I love the instrument from an investment point of view, but my risk and my clients and my compliance departments is hesitant to allow me to go full speed in those markets for local counterparty and local sub-custody risk. So I am, as investment funds, not really allowed to increase my exposure because I'm not allowed to trade with local banks. Neither am I allowed to keep those soft currency emerging market and frontier bonds under safe custody with the local custodian bank. So we thought then in our strategy, how can we employ to a maximum the core facilities of the Clearstream platform to help the investment community out in accessing frontier and emerging markets. And there's 7 basic principles of an ICSD that we can apply now to those markets, which will allow you in your discussion with your risk and compliance officers on accessing those markets and increasing further your exposure. So basically, the number one, it may sound simple, but the number one argument why we are helping the community out is settlement within an ICSD platform. It's internal settlement of local currency instruments with non-resident counterparts. So basically, if you are a asset manager sitting in London, you don't need to trade anymore exclusively with liquidity makers in, for example, Ukraine, but you can trade your bonds now from the ease of your desk with a German-based investment bank or a Paris-based investment bank. So it's basically offshoring of the trading activity onto the Luxembourg platform that we have with the counterparts that we offer in Clearstream, which is a growing number of more than 2,500 internationally well-recognized organizations. So actually, whoever passed the compliance check within Clearstream and have a Clearstream account can act as your counterpart on Ukraine or other emerging market bonds. So basically, you don't need to touch the local market. We take away from you the complexity of opening local accounts, of getting trading lines with local banks. Anyone who trades with you on any other security in the ICSDs can do that now for you for Ukraine government bonds as well. Income payments, the same thing. You will hold the local currency bond in Clearstream. You will receive a coupon or income payment in local currency. And then you can either kick the currency back to the local market or FX it out over there if you still want to have a touch of the local currency, or you can ask Clearstream to do that FX on your behalf. When bonds are in Clearstream, they can also be refinanced and reused. A lot of emerging markets now are rising in their credit rating. The bond gets more liquid, better prices. So basically, once those bonds on an account, you have access with those bonds either to any lending or repo basket that we offer. As said before, we take away from you the complexity of opening accounts locally. Every account in Clearstream is plug and play ready to accept Ukrainian bonds. So no forms to fill out, no tax forms to fill out, no cash accounts to be opened. Whoever has a Clearstream account can use the Ukraine settlement facility. We offer local market single window approach. So if you're an asset manager or an investment bank that wants to have a local access point to, let's say, a single set of Middle Eastern markets, a single set of CIS markets, Central Asian markets, you can do that also through the Clearstream window. So we get allowing you to widen your network without having the need to do all the network creation yourself. And finally, since the internal transactions in Clearstream will mostly take place in US dollar, which is a reference currency for emerging market and frontier markets, you can basically use your Clearstream credit lines and your Clearstream US dollar facilities to finance your trades and transactions on Rivna bonds within Clearstream. So next slide, please, Ale. So how did we get there in that story? How did we, over time, created the link with Ukraine? And then we have to move back a little bit into the wider former Soviet Union region and back to 2012, 2013, where Clearstream was contacted by both the Georgian and the Armenian Ministry of Finance and Central Bank with a request to open their local bond markets to the Clearstream system. Now, Clearstream in those days had a very civil engineering approach, whereby we thought that what is good, let's say in matured Europe, should be good for smaller markets as well. If you take a market where Clearstream is active, like Spain, we want to offer to our clients the maximum service offering, meaning covering all available asset classes, offering all asset services, income services, tax services, corporate action services. We wanted to create always a full STP link with full delivery versus payment facilities. So in our ambition to act as a local bank, we basically try to put a maximum of features onto our products. Now, that comes with a big cost. Before we go live on a very big matured markets, we would have a spend of between 800,000 to 1 million euro to get ready, have the legal opinions, do the IT testing, do the Swift testing. And these are projects that easily take between 2 to 3 years. If you looked at those two smaller markets, Georgia and Armenia, we could not spend that amount to go live. So we discussed with stakeholders, we discussed with investors, and we came to the conclusion that the investment community basically only wanted to have one type of asset class, which is the local currency denominated government bonds. And they wanted to have a markup markdown from the local markets into a Clearstream environment to then further on fully make use of the internal settlement facility that the Clearstream offers to you. So we went working with Georgia and Armenia as some type of guinea pigs. And then in 2016, we came with a functional product whereby we allow to the market to bring over from the local markets, from local counterparts, bonds into the Clearstream system, and then have Lari and DRAM denominated bonds circulate within our system, just like any other German Bund, US Treasury, or UK Gilts. So that was a big success. I mean, today, especially, for example, for Georgia, we represent already 30% of the non-resident investment community. And we learned a lot. We learned how to engage with markets which are very different in nature from the matured European markets we are used to work with. And then we were able to roll out that concept further within the wider former Soviet Union Central Asia region. In 2018, we did the same for Kazakhstan, where we allowed settlement and custody for tenge-denominated Ministry of Finance bonds and NBK notes. And then finally, in 2019, roll it over to the big market that we wanted to cover, which was Ukraine. And with all the lessons learned from the three previous countries, we were able then, thanks to the good collaboration with the Ministry of Finance and National Bank, to offer exactly those features to the Ukraine bond market as well. We were allowed as non-resident organization to open our own custodian account at the National Bank of Ukraine. So the assets of our clients, they are held on an account in the name of Clearstream with the National Bank. So we can assure the safest place of safekeeping in the markets. The daily operations of that account, we have given a power of attorney to Citibank Ukraine to act for us as a representative. So our instructions on our account first go to Citibank, and then Citibank processes further those transactions at the National Bank. Citibank is also our cash operator and our FX operator. So we had a fast start in March 2019, where from day one we have seen activity on the products, and it was for us just a proof that the conceptual thinking behind works, and that just by making things simple, we did not need to create for the Ukrainian, neither for the Kazakh or the Georgian market, the big Ferrari from day one. We could start with the Volkswagen Golf, and then when the market matures, add further features to those markets. In the case of Georgia, where we started in 2006 already, we are now moving not only from government bonds, but also starting to do corporate bonds. So we have a phased approach in our product and our access, whereby we start simple, and then when the market grows more mature, we are going to add additional features to further enhance our service offering. So next slide, please, Ale. So where we are today in 2021. A couple of figures. I hope you will understand that under Luxembourgish banking law, We cannot disclose to you exact figures on assets under custody or volumes. We can give you some indications. And to the same extent, we cannot disclose you client names who are active there. But with some of the comments I make, I think everyone will be able to draw a picture for itself where we are standing. Basically, now in 2021, we can safely assume that the Clearstream link represents 70% of the non-resident investors in Ukraine local currency government bonds. We are circling between 2 and 3 billion US dollar assets under custody. We had some drops due to some geopolitical or macroeconomic issues in the region. We had some drops following the March 2020 COVID crisis. But today we basically have recovered again some of those drops, and we are on a steady growth path. And that 70% of non-resident investors share has been constant over the last 2 years. So we have a very varied number of Clearstream clients today being active on the Ukrainian link. All major global custodians today are active on behalf of their underlying buy-side clients on the link. If ever, as an asset manager, uh, your global custodian would not be aware that they can do Clearstream Ukraine via Clearstream, it's just a matter of letting us know in Clearstream. We have very good contacts with the global custodian community, and we can very quickly make sure that your sales manager at your global custodian is fully aware that it can be done via Clearstream Luxembourg, and it can be very quickly arranged. So not only the 7, 8 large global custodians are active on the Clearstream link, also a large part of regional custodians. There are custodians that only cater for the Scandinavian market or the Central Eastern European markets, or they only cater for the Mediterranean market. Many of those, because they have a Clearstream account, by default will have access to the Clearstream link as well. When it comes to the liquidity makers and the sell side community, we can safely say that all of the 10 major global investment banks active in the emerging market sphere have already been active or are active on the link. So there again, if you are a buy side client, you have never done Ukraine, you bank with a global custodian that has access to Clearstream, it is just a matter of getting in touch with one of the large liquidity makers on Ukraine to very quickly ensure for you internal transactions and get you a provision of bonds onto your account in Clearstream. So both the large global custodians and the regional custodians and the first tier and second tier investment banks are active today. And if it were not the case, we have no problem to guide either the custodian or the investment bank to our products. So what do we have now in the inventory? We cater for all hryvnia-dominated government bonds issued by the Ministry of Finance. We don't cater for the US dollar series because I think the function of Clearstream is to support the de-dollarization of the Ukraine capital market. So we focus only on the hryvnia bonds. I gave there on the slide an overview of the 5 most popular and most traded ISIN codes. You'll see there the 6 years bonds, the 2019 to 2025 is the most popular at this moment in Clearstream. It has the deepest liquidity, the most transactions internally, and then you have in a range of liquidity other 4 ISIN codes that make up the bulk of what we have on offer, but basically all other ISIN codes as they are issued on the weekly auction by the Minister of Finance are there as well. So many investment banks hold a inventory of those bonds in Clearstream, so they will not even need to go into the local markets to get liquidity. They may have it already in Clearstream. So if you want to move fast, it's often only a matter of getting in contact with one of the major investment banks. So we have daily internal secondary market transactions on the platform that ranges from 20, 30 a day, some days less, some days more, but it's a very active, we have a very active secondary market within the Clearstream system with interbrokers being active and so on and so on. So wide variety of ISINs, and little by little, we also see that thanks to the fact that the pricing on the bond gets better, the credit rating of Ukraine gets better, much more liquidity in the system, some of the Ukraine government bonds could potentially be included in any repo or lending basket that would exist in Clearstream. For those activities, prior to doing it, please reach out first to Clearstream to assess with you individually the impact. So what do we have further in the pipeline in the development of the products? We are looking to extending in Ukraine the number of FX partners that we use. Today, your income, you can either kick it out of Clearstream and do the FX locally in Ukraine, or you can request Clearstream to do that FX. We are looking at widening the number of partners that we are using. We are in contact with the National Bank as well to see if we could extend the offering beyond government bonds also to municipal bonds. It's a project that is slowly but surely taking off. We're also investigating and working to offer a true DVP functionality with local counterparts. However, in Rivna, again, we don't think that is in the interest of the Ukraine markets to offer local market US dollar settlements. Again, we think it's good for the markets to increase the international appeal of Rivna. We are aware that Rivna still is not an easy currency to offshore and to wire in and to wire out, but hopefully with the help of the National Bank, we can over time come to a true DVP functionality in Rivna. And for the rest, and for the purpose of time, and I said we were going to talk 20 minutes, so I look here at my clock. I try to finish as sharp as possible. Just like we do in some of our guinea pig markets, Armenia and Georgia, where we already included some other asset classes, we're looking at corporate bonds and equities as well, but there we are fully dependent on the developments of the local markets, the local CSDs. We're very supportive to anyone within the Ukraine post-trade market sphere, and we have a direct contact with the National Bank, the other CSDs, the Ministry of Finance. So we are sure that this is not the end of it. We came already very, very far over those 2 years. If someone had told me in 2019 that in 2021 we would have those volumes, both in assets under custody and in transaction volumes, it's beyond every calculation that we did. So we're really looking forward to the next 2 years to come as well. So thanks again to our colleagues of the Ministry of Finance and the National Bank. Thanks, Ala. Here you have on this slide our contact details. As I said, you're lucky with me. I have one of the easiest Flemish first names and family names, and Serge Chris is the same, I think. It's much more complicated in France around to send an email to. Reach out to us. Reach out to your global custodian or to your investment bank that you trade with, and we are there to guide you further if you're not active yet, or if you're already active through Clearstream on the link, to discuss with you how we can serve you further on the Ukrainian market. So Ala, that is from my side. I give the word back to you and leave it then in the safe hands of your colleagues of the Ministry of Finance and of the National Bank. Your mic is off, Ala.
Sorry. Many thanks, Jan. Thank you so much for your presentation. Now, before passing the floor to Yuri, I want to give some technical details that we have an active chat where you can ask any question you have, and if we can answer it in a written form, we will do it. If not, we will later pass it to Q&A session where we'll give a floor to the one who asks the question. So now we pass the floor to Yuri, and he will give the presentation of Ukraine's development of government bonds, public debt position, and development of local market.
Yeah, thanks, Ala, and thanks, Jan, for this comprehensive presentation. I think, yeah, exactly a couple of years ago when we were visiting Luxembourg and talking to Clearstream management and telling that that will be a success story everyone will be proud of. So we were very happy that your team trusted us and make the bet on Ukrainian market. We pretty much understand you had a lot of other countries on your agenda and limited capacity to prioritize. And I think, yeah, that bet really paid off really very well, and we are proud to to have the dynamic we have on the market now with your support. And I will briefly show how the dynamic looked like pre-Clearstream and post launching of the link. But before, let me maybe start with our plans and our in the debt management and how we want to capitalize on having the access of international investors to Ukrainian market. So first, maybe I will start with the piece of information which was just yesterday available and about our plans for the next 3 years. So we submitted to the parliament the midterm budget declaration with the indications on the deficit to be financed for the next 3 years. And yeah, I must say that we are rather counter-cyclical here in moving quick to the fiscal consolidation. But in the absolute terms, we see that deficit will stay in the levels of close to 200 billion hryvnias, which means that there is a lot of things to be financed through the markets. And obviously, our priority would be financing from the local markets. As another set of figures, in terms of the debt to GDP, we plan to go for gradual consolidation and going back to the downward path and landing below 50% of debt to GDP ratio in 2023 and going further down that path in 2024. I'll please switch to the next slide, and that's actually the dynamic you can see on the debt dynamic in Ukraine, and you can see that we started as a part of our strategy. We wanted to increase the part of the local currency debt and domestic debt in our debt portfolio, and we successfully implemented this with the gradual increase of the financing from domestic market with and Clearstream link opening was a big part of this success. At the moment of time, we already reached 40% of our debt in local currency, which in our view is still suboptimal if you look at other peer countries. So our goal is to come to the 50% in the midterm perspective, which means we will print more in local currency and issuing less in FX in the upcoming years. And for this year already, that strategy was implemented rather successfully. If you look at our plans for this year on domestic market, we repay roughly 370 billion hryvnias, and we plan to raise 517 billion. At the moment of time, we already raised 33% of that, and mostly actually in the local currency. I think more than 120 billion hryvnias out of this number was in hryvnia. For external, obviously, as we rely mostly on domestic market, our plans are more modest. We plan to have roughly $6 billion of external financing. We already raised through the Euro bonds and some of the concessional loans 20% of this amount, and most of the remaining ones we plan to have from the concessional sources. So our main offer to the investors will be for this year on domestic market, where the commercial borrowing will happen in the biggest amount. And in terms of the dynamics for the last years, you can see that before Clearstream, we were really relying mostly on very short-term debt domestically and a lot on the FX financing from the local banks. Launching of the link helped us to do more in hryvnia and to do more in longer instruments. So both are fully in line with our debt management strategy, because if you look at our main risks identified when we do our debt sustainability analysis, those are FX risk and refinancing risk. So going longer and going more in local currency is exactly the answer to how to tackle those risks in the prudent manner. And you can see that like between 2018 and 2019, there was the biggest increase in the domestic market borrowing in hryvnia, and big part of this increase actually contributed to the longer than 1 year instruments. There was decrease due to obvious reasons in 2020 when the investors became more risk averse, but in this year we already see that there is a return of the appetite to longer instruments, and most of our borrowing happens in the between 1 and 3 years. In hryvnia, and pretty much we are very close to the full last year number as a result of this 5 months. So we see much bigger appetite comparing to last 2 years in terms of the interest to our domestic market, and we hope it will just grow. If you move to the next slide here, you can see that in more details how the dynamic played. So you see that pre-Clearstream era, to put it this way, right? The most of the borrowing happened in the short term. Launching of the link and increase of more appetite to the longer instrument from international investors actually help us to go longer than 5 years already in 2019, with big part of the financing coming in this category, which is fully in line with our plans. We had to stop market operations when the COVID outbreak happened, but we had a good portion of liquidity accumulated prior to this. And then we were very carefully coming back to the market with rather short instrument, due to the increase of the borrowing cost for us. But we saw from the end of last year the return of the interest to the longer instruments, and that return was rather permanent. In the course of the first 5 months of this year, you can see that most of the borrowings happened in 1 to 3 year category, and we see the renewal of the interest to 3-5 years instruments, and even over 5-year instruments. And I will touch base on our plans further down this presentation. Ali, if you can move to the next slide. Yeah, you can see what was the dynamic between the last month before the link was opened and now in terms of the debt stock in local currency. So the share of national bank is gradually decreasing. So it decreased by 10% in absolute terms due to the no market presence of the national bank. So we just repay the old bonds to them, they mature, but we substituted from 2 main sources, being domestic banks who increase their share and non-residents who increase their share to 10%. And I say at peak in beginning of 2020 it was closer to 15% or more. So that's the 2 main driving forces for the increase of the holding of local currency debt. We also actually in rather modest numbers, but we see the increase of the trend for the retail investors and local companies to add now as the yields on the local currency bonds are more interesting than on the deposits domestically. In terms of non-residents participation, you see that there was increase after the link was open until the COVID crisis. Pretty much it was steady increase of the share of non-residents, and as I said, almost to 16% of total debt stock in Ukraine. Then it was gradual deleveraging as in any other emerging economy in the course of 2020, and then the trend reversed in the end of 2020. There was, if you look at the flows, there was outflows in April due to the geopolitical tensions, which has also resulted in outflows in the external Eurobond curve. But now we see that once things calm down, we see the reversal of the trend, and on the last auctions we have steady participation and even increase of participation of non-residents on the auctions. Even on this Tuesday we saw I think more than $100 million came in one auction from the international investors. So that's the positive trend. In terms of can you please go to the next slide? In terms of secondary trading, we also see there is a pickup. When we opened the link with Clearstream, there were one of the feedback we heard from the market, and we do this regular exercises of getting more feedback how the market operates and where can we improve. The most of the comments were going to the secondary market operation, and we see that the risk profile of the domestic bank also shifted already. They can go longer. So we are in a situation now when both international investors and domestic banks are trading in the same bonds. So there is increase of the secondary market liquidity, and that trend continues. So we can see that we don't have full statistics, I think, for May at the moment of time, but we see that the turnover on the secondary market is also picking up, which actually gives us a lot of comfort in terms of talks with the index team on the index inclusion of our bonds, because the secondary market operations are very important for them. And Jan mentioned in his presentation the 2025 bond, which is the first bond which reached the benchmark side to be included in the GBI EM index. And I think everyone already read the index team report that Ukraine with this bond is on the watch list to be included in the index. We were rather jealous that Egypt had 13 bonds there on the watch list and we have only one. So our goal is actually to increase the outstanding maturities to the index eligible size further on. As the minimum I think maturity to be index eligible is 13 months. We will concentrate on the longer part of our curve. And the minimum threshold for any second bond to be included is $1 billion. And you can see that there are a bunch of bonds who are at the level of $0.4 million already. And there is this 27 bond which we reopened and ready to place more for it to bring it to the index size. So I think we will concentrate on this part of the curve. So we will add more, subject obviously to the interest from the investors on that 23 and 24 bonds. And we also will open a new bond with the goal to be index eligible and to reach $1 billion target this year, which will be a new 26 bond offered first time next Tuesday. And that will be the main next bond we concentrate on in terms of bringing it to the $1 billion size together with the May 27 bonds. So we will have, I think, two bonds of 23, one on 24 and one on 26, one on for 27 to offer to the market with all of those to reach the to index eligibility size in the course of this year. So that's our strategy. We plan to go longer, as we said. We see now that most of the demand is concentrating for 2-year and 3-year bonds, but we already have enough of indication of interest for the longer instruments. So we as an issuer are very responsive to the request of the markets. We have a lot of primary dealers also on this call, and we have very active communication with them. So if there is also interest from the investors to any other maturities, we are looking at the way to accommodate those. But I think in terms of the minimum size of any of the issuance, we will look at least 0.4 billion on the mid part of the curve, which is comfortable to have a good secondary market liquidity. But for the longer part of the curve, as I said, we will try to go to up to $1 billion in each of the bonds for it to be liquid on the secondary market and potentially index eligible in the future. So that's all on my side. I think I was also efficient with the time and make it in 20 minutes. I'll pass over to the National Bank here on the presentation of their achievements and their view of the market development. And after this, we'll be happy to take the questions.
So good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'll please show the presentation. My name is Alexey Lupin. I'm head of Open Markets Department at the National Bank of Ukraine. One of our tasks is, so we are looking after secondary market, and I prepared a very short presentation about FX market. FX market is very important for investing in Ukraine because non-resident investors usually come with dollars or euros, so foreign currency need to convert into local. As well at maturity, so many investors convert domestic currency to foreign currency, take money back. So the Ukraine FX market is a most liquid market in Ukraine, with average daily turnover at about $400 million. It is only interbank segment. If we add clients operations, so the average daily turnover is about 1 billion. Market represents foreign banks and private banks activity. So foreign banks, it's 1/3, and Ukrainian banks, including state-owned, it is about 2/3. 74 banks. Market is quite concentrated, so top 20 banks account 87% of all volume. And most popular trading platforms, Reuters, and now it's Refinitiv, 2/3 of volume, and Bloomberg, it's 1/3. So the market is highly dollarized. So in terms of the share of US dollars is more than 80%. The rest, second currency is euro, and all other currencies less than 1%. So we have only, generally speaking, two currencies: big dollar and small euro at 1%. All others. So the daily average volume is increasing. You can see that, for example, in 2018, the average daily volume interbank segment was 250, 19 380. From the in 220 year, in 2020 it was 420 million a day. This year we expect that average volume will increase to 450, maybe 500 to the end of the year. Next slide, please. This is the exchange rate dynamic in 2018. You can see the normal seasonal behavior of Ukrainian hryvnia exchange rate. We start the year this relatively high rate, and then to the beginning of the summer revaluation by several hryvnias, couple of hryvnias. The summer is like that period, vacations and nothing. And from autumn, we see the devaluation of hryvnia. So it's normal seasonal trend. In 2019, we had an inflow of non-residents and as well as Clearstream link. So we see the revaluation from 28 to 23 at the end of this year. 2020 is COVID year. It's also the different. So we have a spike in March, beginning of quarantine and restrictions. But after that, the trend is more or less horizontal. And now we have a exchange rate is about 27.3.4. The volatility of exchange rate is also very low, and our interventions, for example, if in 2019 we had maybe 10 times a month intervention, so 10 times a month. Now, from the beginning of 2021, we had only 12 days with interventions. Next slide, please. So the balance of supply and demand. So the now market is more or less in the balance and self-balanced. So no need in NBU intervention much. The main sellers is companies which agri companies and companies in metallurgy, and as well as companies which offers IT services. Main buyers is companies which imports goods and services. Now it's a dividend period, so we see a lot of dividends. So banks buy foreign currency for dividends, repatriation. And in the past, one of the main buyers was our NAK Naftogaz. It's a state oil and gas company. Now it is more or less balanced, and now it is becoming seller. In the past year, Naftogaz was the net seller of the foreign currency. Next slide, please. Several words about forward transaction. So the forwards now it is not widely used, but they now so you can see it's about 2% of overall FX turnover on the market. But we see the growing number of companies which actively use forwards, deliverable and NDF forwards for hedging FX risk. And you can see the dynamic in 2020. We have purchases $2.5 billion, sales $400 million. This year, from the beginning, it's 1.2 purchases $1 billion and sales 220. So we expect that this year the volumes will be bigger than in 2020. Next slide, please. So the domestic government bond, Yuri already showed the bubbles or pies diagram. So you can see that in 2019 we took only hryvnia-denominated bonds here. So the total outstanding amount of hryvnia-denominated bonds in 2019 was 600 billion, and now it's about 900 billion. So it's 40% growth for 2.5 years. The share of National Bank of Ukraine is decreasing because it's a legacy portfolio, so we do not add to this portfolio. It's only maturing and redemptions. And you can see very interesting trends that individuals were 0.2% in 19, and now it's 5 times more. It's about 1%. Non-residents were 1% in 19, and now it's 11. So it's quite a good dynamic. Also, banks increase by 7 percentage points ownership of the hryvnia-denominated government bond. Next slide, please. These graphs show the dynamic of the non-residents ownership in hryvnia-denominated government bond. You can see the peak in February 2020. It's a pre-COVID peak, 127 billion hryvnias. During 2020, it's a gradual decrease of non-resident ownership, and the local low was November at 75. And after that, again increase. It's now it's about $100 billion at the moment in the portfolio non-residents. We expect this number will be increasing gradually to the end of this year. Next slide, please. It is secondary market trading, so these numbers a little bit different from Yuri. Yuri shows the accumulated volume. Here we show you the average daily volume during the year and months. So, for example, in March 2020, we had a peak about more than 1 billion was the average daily trading volume. Reflects fire sales in the crisis. But generally, we see that the market become more liquid. So it is not Clearstream market. It is a domestic market, and we expect that average volume in 2021 will be at about 700 million hryvnias a day. Next slide, please. This slide shows the yield curves before pre-COVID at the end of February 2020 and at the peak of COVID crisis at the end of March. You can see that interest rates and yield to maturities almost doubled from 10% on the short end to say 20%. It's flat curves. We can see it's like flat 10% flat all maturities and becoming 20%. Next slide, please. Alla. So now the yield curve is positive, have a positive slope, and you can see that approximately up to 6-7 months the rates are single digits from 8% to say 9 point something. At the longer end is about the maximum rate is about 13%. So that's the yield curve. And even after increasing the NBUK rate from 6% to 7.5% from the beginning of this year, we see that short end of the government bond yields moving closer and converge with the NBUK rate. Next slide, please. Nothing. Thank you. It's the end of my presentation. If you have any question, we'll be glad to answer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alexei. Thank you very much. Now we have time to take some questions if anyone has. You can raise a hand and we will give the floor to you. So I already received some questions about the presentation. If we are going to share it, we are going to share it tonight in our investor relations section at the website of the Ministry of Finance. So you can download it from there.
We have a question from Oleg. Oleg, just unmute and ask it probably.
Okay, Oleg, please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, thanks for all information and all your presentations. I have one question regarding GBI Emerging Market Index and our paper, our bond maturing in 2025. When it is expected to be included into this index? Do you have any updates? Thanks.
So we don't have a direct communication in terms of the exact date. We can refer to the normal practice where it's like what you saw with other issuers, there was like roughly up to half a year period between the bond was put on the watch list and was included in the index. So I would pretty much point to this time frame as the average on the market, but we were not provided any like precise date from the index team at the moment of time.
Thank you.
Let's see if we have any other questions. Please go ahead. I don't see.
It looks like we covered everything in our presentations, right? People don't have any further questions. Yeah, so I just, having the Clearstream team here with us, if you have a lot, there are technical questions I think we heard from the investors. So if there are any of those, that's perfect opportunity also to ask them and to figure out what you need.
Yeah, and if possible, possibly one question to Clearstream, like regarding the practice, how do you usually act? You usually have in the market only one entitled bank for all the operations. I mean, forex operations and custody operations, or there are some cases, maybe some countries where you have a couple of banks. It could provide better rates for possibly better rates for underlying customers. Thank you.
We would normally, per asset class, only have one custodian. So in certain countries, you may have per asset class a split, let's say government bonds and corporate bonds maybe with one custodian in the local market, and equities maybe with another custodian in the local market. In the case of Ukraine, where we only cover at this moment one asset class, to make sure that our product remains competitive, we use only one operator. We have always remember that we ourselves, basically, our main provider is the National Bank, who is our final custodian. The operator of that account is Citibank. And as we said in the presentation as well, that one of the projects we're working on is when it comes specifically to FX services, is potentially to widen the range of FX providers that we will use in Ukraine. Now, it's always very important to understand that Clearstream is not really a FX bank. We don't have our own FX team. We need to rely on partners in the local markets. FX for Clearstream is an auxiliary service. It's not a core business. We facilitate to our clients FXing of income, but basically the best way to go is always for a participant to take the income out of his Clearstream account and to wire it to the local markets and to the FX locally, which is also something that we support. Now, for convenience, many investors prefer that we do that FX ourselves, but we are working now on making sure that also that FX product remains competitive by expanding the range of partners that we could potentially use.
Yeah. And if I can add something, it's true that at the moment there are some limitations with the cash that our client can wire out. Yes. So at the moment they need to have a local cash account should they want to use a specific FX provider. This is something which is on the discussion with NBU, of course, but it's their own call whether or not they want to extend the free ability of the hryvnia, right? But of course, it's something that we are considering for the future.
Thank you.
We have one more question. Claire, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much for this very interesting event. Maybe 3 questions, if I may. 2 for Clearstream, Mr. Williams and Mr. Christ. 2 questions for you. Outside the CIS markets, have you looked into or have you entertained relationships with the other countries? And I'm thinking in particular of certain Latin American countries like Chile, Peru, DOMREP, much more attuned to GDNs, a bit like Ukraine initially, or also Philippines or Uruguay. And the second question to you is, to the extent that those transactions on Clearstream, bond transactions or associated with dummy foreign exchange transactions, are you by any chance publishing publicly the FX risks or the FX spot rates at which these transactions occur? And the reason why I'm saying this is that could provide a bridge between the onshore local DVP and the offshore spot transactions happening, and that might effectively help curbing the volatility at times. And finally, one question for Mr. Butza, if I may. When you've started to initiate this relationship with Clearstream and with your experience of GDN, what were the main advantages for you to really ramp up settlement offshore of UKREK-TBs and UKREK-GBs? Thank you.
Okay, I will start with the first question and the second question. When you mentioned Philippines and Uruguay, these are already two countries that Clearstream offers in its coverage, so we are active there. When it comes to Latin America, it's Latin America we look at Latin America. Apart from Uruguay, we're active in Argentina and Mexico. Now it's a very complex market to enter, in the sense that many of those markets function on a final beneficial owner regime. Colombia and Brazil, for example, where the actual final beneficial investor needs to be known in the entire trading chain and custody chain, which is not easy for us to work in. Just the logistics to organize connections to LATAM, the business case is difficult. We do look at Chile and Peru, but at the moment, the business case for us is not strong enough to be active there. When it comes to the wider CIS region, I think with the coverage we have now, we are very satisfied. Very far over the horizon, we have very preliminary talks with Uzbekistan, because the market is evolving there quickly. However, we really have to look there at the time horizon of at least 3 to 4 years. Other countries, for geopolitical reasons, are far more complex to approach. So nonetheless we talk with everyone, but it's often a matter of business case and capacity. Further on, if you look at Europe, hopefully by early summer, midsummer, we will be able to bring good news on Serbian local currency bonds as well, which would mean that we then kind of make our European offering complete. And as I said in the beginning, on the 14th of June, we will add Saudi Arabia with local Saudi government corporate bonds and ETFs to our platform as well. So yes, we have a very dynamic emerging market and frontier market approach. We cannot do everything at the same time. It's a matter of capacity, business case, risk, and so on and so on. But some of the things we learned in Ukraine, we are applying to other markets as well. So your second question of whether we publicize FX spot rates, no, that is not. As I said in the beginning, we don't consider ourselves as a FX provider. It's a supporting service that we offer, not a main service. Clients who do a FX with us on punctual occasion to repatriate coupons and income will, of course, through their individual reporting, know what rate has been applied. But it's not something that we offer now. But nonetheless, I think your question is very interesting. We would be very willing to discuss it with you bilaterally. So you have our contact details. So don't hesitate to reach out to either myself or Serge to see a bit what concept you have in mind and how it would further fit into the product that we have today. And the third question I will leave to the colleagues either of the Ministry of Finance or the National Bank.
Thanks, Claire, for the question, and thanks, Jan, for, I think, comprehensive response on first two one. So on the third one, I think, like regarding GDNs and the Clearstream link. So GDN was a good first step to put Ukrainian market on the radars of international investors. And that's how we got first inflows, like first sizable inflows to the market from investment community outside of Ukraine. But obviously, Clearstream gives much more benefit, because it actually, our goal was always to have one yield curve in Hryvnia and all liquidity concentrated in one place. And the possibility for all the international players to access the market pretty much on the same terms as the local players puts everyone in one spot for liquidity and gives the possibility to bigger turnover and to better price discovery. And better price discovery is essential not only for the investors on the secondary market, but also as an indicative for us as an issuer, because if they have more liquidity and smaller amount of bonds, we obviously see the prices much better. So that was driving our negotiations, and we wanted to have as easy, as quick and cheap and direct access as possible. And obviously Clearstream was very responsive and very proactive in offering this one. And we see now the outcome of this, that it was really a very good strategy to push forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So if you don't have any question, I think we will wrap up. We will have the recording of the event, and you know that we are always open for communications and very responsive. So please put us an email and we will be happy to answer if you have any questions. And from now, thank you very much. Thank you, Clearstream team. Thank you, Alexei, and thank you, Yuri. We were very happy to see you in this virtual format, and we hope to see you in offline format very soon. Thanks, and let's stay in touch.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Many thanks.
Bye.
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 Bye.